Session 2 began with the party delving deeper into the mine. An alarm trap in the form of a wind chime made of bone had been set off by Almera, alerting whatever was ahead that the party was here. The group was now on edge, keeping a sharp eye and ear out for whoever they may encounter. As Almera the Paladin pushed further down the rocky tunnel and his lantern light stretched out into a large cave opening, Ivan the magic user turned back and made his way into the signature mine shaft. He found that a little further down the cave corridor was a ravine that divided the mine shaft, a single beam being the remnants of a bridge that once used to cross this cavern. While he inspected, Ivan caught movement at the far end of the cavern and, holding his lantern forward, noticed moulded into the rock the features of what looked like a chameleon person. Long gangly legs, large eyes with pinpoint pupils, and a spine running down the head. He decided to break the single beam, making sure whatever was ahead could not catch the group off guard. Around this time, Gumball the Halfling met up with Ivan. Almera and Vix had pressed forward somewhat, scared of the unknown. As they made their way into the entrance of the cave, suddenly they were ambushed. An overpowering stench filled their nostrils, and a group of these chameleon creatures, soon identified by Ivan as troglodytes, had jumped the pair. Almera and Vix fled down back into the tunnel from whence they came, meeting up with Ivan and Gumball. The party had a devastating fight, in which Gumball, nauseated from the troglodyte stench, suffered a fatal wound. A trog clawed through his armour and bit into his neck, tearing out his throat. The rest of the party decided that rather than end up like Gumball, they would have to flee. They let off the last round of attacks as they ran, leaving Gumball's body behind as fodder. The troglodytes did not pursue them out of the cave. The trio returned to town and rested up for the night. The next day, while tending to their wounds, they met another halfling named Frank Grimble, Gumball's cousin. It turns out Gumball had been in some trouble in the Shire and had fled. Frank was here to find the missing halfling. Upon hearing that Gumball had been killed, he decided to join the group and avenge his cousin and collect his remains. After resting up, the party then spent time looking for more help, and they found it in a young farmhand named Edwin. He was ready for battle with his father's rusty sword, and he swore servitude to Almera as a retainer. The now group of 5 stocked up on supplies and returned to the mines, this time more prepared for the sneaking troglodytes. Almera and Edwin pushed into the room in formation, shields raised and back to back. Vix had an arrow nocked and Ivan a flask at the ready. Frank clutched a pouch at his waist. As the warriors made their way into the centre of the den, they saw the body of Gumball torn apart, surrounded by various other bones that had been picked clean, the remnants of previous adventurers and treasure hunters. The troglodytes jumped out, and a fight commenced. Swords were swung, arrows fired, flasks lit, and Frank made his way to the north side of the room and scattered a bag of marbles down behind the troglodytes. Edwin met the same fate as Gumball, slashed by a troglodyte, but with Edwin's death, 2 more troglodytes met their end from a flask of oil and an arrow. Panicked about their numbers, the troglodytes fled the cave, some of them slipping on the marbles and subsequently being beaten to death while on the floor. After this, the party collected the bodies and loot and made their way to the miner's lodge outside to rest up. Frank retrieved any items that Gumball still had on him, and the party then returned to the caves, following past the troglodyte den and to the tunnel seen from the other side of the ravine. Then, they managed to surprise the last remaining troglodytes hiding against the walls, even causing one of them to fall down the cave into the ravine. Ahead of them, a rickety lift, big enough for 6 people, to the side a crank lever. Almera stepped into the lift and heard the sound of the rope fraying and the wood splintering. He swiftly stepped back off it, realising that any more weight may spell his doom. As he did this, Frank pulled the crank for shits and giggles and caused the lift to plummet down to the bottom and crash. The party looked down the elevator shaft and saw that it was too deep for even their lantern light. They then backtracked and followed another route down the cave system, eventually finding a hidden wall that, when broken open, led to a window 30 foot down the elevator shaft. Using large rocks and rubble as supports, they rappelled down the shaft and found themselves in the subterranean cave, larger than any in the rest of the dungeon. The uneven rock walls glistened with moisture, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the cave, creating an eerie ambience. The ground beneath your feet is covered in a thick layer of soft, damp soil, and you can hear the squelching of mud with each step. The walls of the cave are adorned with glittering stalactites and stalagmites, formed over the centuries by dripping water and mineral-rich deposits. The stalactites hang like icicles from the ceiling, while stalagmites rise like ancient sentinels from the cave floor, creating a surreal landscape. At the far eastern side of the cave, your light catches a glimmering reflection. As you approach, you see a deep pool of water, its surface still and glassy. The water appears to be incredibly deep, and its mysterious darkness beckons you to explore further. This was read to Ivan as he approached the lake. And as Ivan leaned down and disturbed the surface, a large tentacle rose from the depths and slammed down beside him and Frank. And that is where we ended the session. So it was a real interesting one, the first actual dungeon for the group. They made their way through pretty much all of it, besides the last fight that they've got at the end to do. This is a really dangerous one as well. If they try to just hack and slash their way against this octopus, this giant octopus, then it could one-shot them, especially Ivan with only having 3 hit points. So I'm looking forward to see how they work around it and use oil to maybe burn it out or something like that. I think that was one of the ideas thrown around. But yeah, there was a lot of strategic thinking, especially like the breaking of the bridge. I didn't expect them to do that, breaking the bridge in front of them so nothing could come and get them. I thought they would see it a lot more as, this is an obstacle in our way that we need to get past to get further into the dungeon. Instead, they used it to their advantage. A real shame that Gumbo died. It was actually a natural 20 that killed him, so we're a little bit bummed about that, but it gets to show that the party, how dangerous dungeons can be. And now they're a lot more cautious, and also seem to have this fiery vengeance that Gumbo died. And yeah, they were very angry at the troglodytes, as I mentioned, tripping them up and then like beating them. I think all 4 of them, dived onto one troglodyte and were just slashing and hitting him and stuff like that. It was a bit of a sorrowful sight. But yeah, and in beating those troglodytes, I think they did gain a bit of confidence in their own combat abilities, in a sense that when they had their first fight, they were all very stand back, other than Almera, I guess, and they were worried about like fighting the trogs, and they thought, God, these are really overpowering. But then by the time that they got the next time round, they understood the tactics of the troglodytes. They knew the kind of guerrilla warfare that they used and the tricks of blending in, so they were able to look out for that and kept on, like checking the walls and the sort. Yeah, they did avoid the traps in the dungeon, such as the lift, for example, which they'd actually kind of have a workaround. If one person descended at a time, then they would be able to have gotten to the bottom of the lift without it crashing. However, pulling people back up might have been a bit harder. And yeah, if more people stepped on at once, then they would have had some real trouble. Yeah, something I noticed as well is that there was 2 big holes in the dungeon, the ravine and the lift. And the party wanted to know what was down at the bottom of these holes, but they didn't really do any interaction with it. Like, Ivan, stood by the edge of the ravine, and I said that, from standing here, the lantern light sort of spreads out down, but even now you can't see the bottom of it. And rather than learning how far it went by, I don't know, throwing a torch down or tying a rope onto the end of the lantern and lowering it until they could see the bottom, they just decided to kind of shrug and move on, which I thought was sort of odd. Maybe it was something on my end of like the way that I described it, but as maybe they thought it was impossibly deep. But yeah, the ravine wasn't. It was actually 50 foot deep, and the lanterns go for 30 feet. So at the very bottom of the ravine, there was some treasure. There was bits of gold and things like that, now a dead troglodyte, and also a secret tunnel that would lead along to the cave. The secret tunnel actually was so tight that halflings would be able to, and small creatures, walk through it at a normal pace. However, the rest of the party would have to crawl, and it would be pretty hard. However, that was in itself a bit of a trap, because it opens up at the lake, so that when you go through, you jump down into the lake or fall into the lake, and you end up literally in the mouth of a octopus, which, you know, would have been kind of funny. And honestly, I think if they did explore further and Gumbo didn't die against the troglodytes, knowing him, he would have probably done that. Yeah. So this next fight going to be very difficult. Interested to see how they sort that out. And other than that, yeah, no, I really enjoyed running this one. Something that was mentioned after, when we kind of have like, you know, after game, post game chat, I guess, you know, just chatting around about things. Almera had mentioned that he wasn't really into playing the Paladin too much. He's played the Paladin in a couple of sessions in a previous D&D game, and he wanted to try some things out a little bit more. So he's thinking of changing class. And he mentioned, he said about like oath breaking and things like that. And I explained that in Old School Essentials, when you oath break, you become a fighter. But with that, the fighter is a little bit bland. All you really get is, you know, those small few abilities of being able to use all armor and weapons, as well as the you can build a stronghold if you have enough money, and then there's something further down the line that I can't quite remember at the moment, off the top of my head, that is. But so I kind of, I was spitballing and playing around with the idea of adding something in, like I know Dungeon Core Classics has Mighty Deeds, 5e has Maneuvers, so I was thinking of maybe putting something in like that. But when I was looking around, I saw on an advertisement for the Carcass Crawler zine that the fighter has some extra stuff in there, as well as some thievery skills for all player characters, non-thief player characters, and a revamping of the thief system for D6s. That's something that I'd be interested in, especially because the Frank player likes to do sort of sneaky stuff and has already tried stealing things and failed at it. So I guess that's something that I'm wanting to maybe introduce, as it could help them out. However, I don't want it to overshadow Vix's ability to, you know, steal and sneak around and just be a general thief. But yeah, it was a real fun session. The first proper dungeon from a DM side of things. I really enjoyed using the dungeon tracker, marking down each turn as it went by. I originally thought that it might be a little clunky using the dungeon tracker and being in a sort of initiative type thing, but no, it was the exact opposite actually. It really smoothened things out for everybody, and they were able to easily kind of took their turns and thought about, well, what will we do next in line. So that was good to see. And yeah, as well as keeping on the lantern stuff, there is something that I completely forgot about that I should have kept my eye on. Was we tracked the lantern spacing, but they left one day and then came back, and I forgot to check how much lantern, or at least declare to them how much of their lantern light they had left, the oil. They did top back up on oil and things like that, so I guess, you know, that's what we could say for replenishing it. But I'm looking forward to them being in another dungeon, maybe a bigger dungeon, and their lanterns then going out and then having to use up some more of the resources, and how kind of scary that could be, being deep in the depths of a dungeon and then everything goes dark and they're like, oh shit. So this dungeon was quite short. It was a smallish, only a handful of rooms really. I'm interested to see going down further how they will deal with larger dungeons. Like with this one, they were able to just go in, and then when they needed to get out and rest, they moved out of the dungeon and went in the camping lodge, the miner's lodge, to take a breather for the 10 minutes that they need to do as part of the dungeon exploration mechanics. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they'll do further down the line, when every 6 turns, I believe it is, every 6 turns that they need to rest, because with that, they'll have to think about barricading doors and keeping an eye out in the dungeon, maybe even thinking tactically about resting. That's something that I kind of want to see, rather than just, oh yeah, we rest up here and we're all okay. In addition to that, wandering monsters. Gonna have, looking forward to maybe building a dungeon that has a lot more wandering monsters are more prevalent in, really. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week, hopefully. It was nice having you here. Look after yourself and take care. Bye-bye.